All right, everybody, welcome back. I hope everybody got something to drink. Little tea for me. And then let's see, maybe put on some extra layers because I'm freezing in here. So I'm so excited about this next talk. One of my favorite talks, I think. I don't know, they're all my favorite. It's been a pretty good playlist, if I say so. Let me introduce our next speaker, Derek Binkley. He is a senior software engineer at Spark Labs, and he first got his start way back fixing the Y2K date problem in COBOL, and since then he's moved on to other languages and coding platforms like PHP, JVM languages, JavaScript, MySQL, Elasticsearch, and Oracle. He also teaches, he enjoys teaching others through speaking, mentoring, and writing articles. He works to encourage developers to write clean and testable code. And when he's not in front of a computer, he's spending his time with family, traveling. I don't know, during COVID times, we should ask him about that. He makes pizza and drink beer. I am all for that. So Derek, are you, there you are.
Yes.
Welcome.
Thank you for that great introduction.
So Derek's talk is teaching through code review. One of my dear topics, close to my heart. So all yours, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Welcome. I am so happy to be here virtually in this Wisconsin DevFest. A great conference. A lot of great material has been covered so far, and I hope that I can add to it. Today I'm talking about code reviews, but this talk is not focused on a how-to for code reviews. I'm going to be focusing on one specific and I think often overlooked benefit of code reviews, which is the learning and teaching aspect of a code review. Now, before I get started here, talking about the teaching, I want to talk just a little bit of background about the code reviews. Why do we code review? We often like protecting the branch, ensuring our software keeps bugs to a minimum, and this is kind of a gatekeeper approach. We're keeping out bad or unworthy code, and that's good to strive for a high quality of code. However, we just heard to talk about not using language to be a gatekeeper. Well, I think that this kind of gatekeeper approach, if you approach code reviews that way, it can add to a lot of friction between team members, and it also can set up an environment where your senior or lead devs are really intimidating to junior developers and not encouraging input. So that's what I want to do, is help you, give you some ideas today where you can take back to your code reviews or just your development in general, and really encourage everyone to learn from each other. A few years ago, I joined a new team, and code review was super important at this team. And our code was expected to be of the highest quality. We had, huge clients that, were doing millions of dollars in sales, and we had to tune things to be able to handle, Black Friday rushes, and just dealing with, tens of thousands of transactions a second. And, it was just really important that we had a high standard. And I get that. But there were some major problems that I learned from at this organization. And one of those was that there were really no standards in their code. And I'm not talking about, a tabs versus spaces type of standard. I'm talking about, having a controller with 5 to 10,000 lines of code in a single class, and then having another project that focuses on extreme testability by, having single purpose service methods and, and just a more modern way of approaching things. But we were expected to code into these two styles, and then we had different people doing code reviews that were expecting us to code in one style versus another, and it got really really difficult because you could the code review process just became this point of contention for a lot of this code, and I was really confused. I'm like, well, what do you want me to do here? I don't understand. In one place I had to do, depending on who was going to look at the code and who was going to review it, I had to write in two totally different styles of code to get my code to pass. Needless to say, this was not a good experience. And actually, this tension between me and some other developers really actually led to me being put on like an improvement plan to get better at coding, which was kind of a bizarre feeling to me. After when I joined the team, I had almost 20 years of experience in coding, and then all of a sudden I'm like, it's like, I'm back to square one. What's going on here? And I didn't last too much longer, that organization. But I really take that as a learning experience. There were some good stuff they did as far as code quality, but I also learned a lot about how not to do a code review process. And so, so the consistency there, having consistency in what you expect of people and letting them know is going to lead to you being able to really reduce your friction in the code reviews. So reducing the friction is going to be important, because how can you have a learning environment set up if you are, have all this tension there and this friction? Some advice that I've heard from others is, okay, automate your tedious checks, your indentions and all that code style stuff. Use some linting tool and get that out of your code reviews. You don't need to be fighting over that on a daily or weekly basis. It doesn't make sense. And as I mentioned in the last slide, being consistent. Automating a lot of that consistency, but also and letting people know what to expect is going to be really important. Even if everyone gives a different style or you don't have like hard and fast rules, just knowing that is going to be important for your developers, especially new additions to the team. Now, for me, another problem that I see in code reviews a lot is that some companies just don't make time for it. I see this especially when you're dealing in the consulting world where I am now, because it's just not thought of as, oh, well, our customer doesn't want to pay for that. Or they just said, just code, just get stuff done. And and I heard that at a lot of different jobs. It's like, just do your job. Don't, make waves and try to add in this other process that we don't know what it does. So what I actually started like kind of sneaking it in places, just slowly adding time for code review to my estimates, because in my mind, performing the code review was just as important as writing a test or testing it myself or having a client test it or writing the code or writing the specs. All of that goes into, building that feature, building that user story and delivering it. So I really feel that, if you just add that time in, and, it may take some time to get to that point, but once you get to where those are really added into your process, you're going to find that your customers are going to probably be happy because you have, better code, or at least just as good code, and you're helping your team learn. So definitely like making time for it. And I say that too because if you have to just rush through a code review, you're not going to take the time to teach and learn from it. Okay, now that we've got some of those like little things out of the way, what are we really talking about, teaching through code review? What do I mean by that? And how is it going to help your process? One of the biggest things, or I don't know if it's the biggest thing, but a really important thing is knowledge sharing. You're sharing knowledge about what that project does. You're essentially helping train another developer on what this code does, so that you're not the only one who can bug fix it. You're not the only one who can add to it later. You're not the only one who knows what's going on. All of a sudden, by sharing your code and having a ways for somebody else to see what you've done and why, that's really important method to get people up to speed and participating in your team. In an earlier talk, there was a great talk this morning about accessibility, and I just made a screenshot of one of the slides that says, pass on the learning, spread the awareness. And I really think that that's so important, because that's something that I do in code reviews is, I bring up accessibility. Because a lot of times other developers, don't really think about it. It's not on their mind. So if I get the other developers start to thinking about it, and that's just it's a really good way to share that knowledge during that code review process. Another question topic that a lot of people mention is, can a younger reviewer or a younger developer participate in the review process? Oh yeah, I say totally. I think it's really important to get junior developers reviewing senior developers' code. Now this seems backwards, and I think that's a good thing. It takes away that gatekeeper approach where the senior leads are the ones that know everything, and they have to check off this list and make sure you're doing your job, and so that you can get to that great point of releasing your code. Well, you know what? A junior developer has a lot to offer. They can really bring a lot to the table as far as looking at the code. And not only that, they can learn by reading through senior or lead developers' code, because they're seeing, okay, this person knows this project really well. They've been working for 10, 15, 20 years in the industry. They know a lot. And they can see how all the things that you learned through your mistakes and through working with others over the years, you're helping pass that on by having them look and read and understand your code. So I think that yes, you should have juniors review code when possible. But again, you need to have a consistent procedure, because you can't just throw a bunch of code to somebody who just joined your team, maybe worked at one other place, but doesn't have a whole lot of experience, and say, okay, review this, get back to me by the end of the week. They're not going to know what to do. So you have to have a procedure for them in place to say, okay, here's what to look for, that type of thing. I'm going to share a lot of resources that can help you with that, because I don't want to put all that onus onto you to say, okay, well, now I have to, that's another thing I have to teach these junior developers. It's probably just easier just to hire senior developers. I hear stuff like that a lot. Now, if we want to teach having them look at our code or learn from somebody else reading your code, it's got to be readable code. I mean, this is it's just important. If you can't read the code and it's really hard to look for, it's going to make the whole process more tedious, and you're going to waste time, just going back and forth on like small things like, what's going on here? I don't understand this. Or they're just going to skip over it and say, okay, well, it looks good to me. And don't totally understand it, but the test passed, so I'm just going to move on. I've certainly done that too, where I was like, I don't understand what's going on here, but it does what it should do, so I'm just going to pass it and move on. So I just gave a little example from the PHP world of some unreadable code. I shouldn't say unreadable. You can read it. It's just not as readable as it could be. It's kind of a mess, and a lot of people might say, okay, this is some people making some rookie mistakes here as far as not naming their variables properly, or like prop 1 data, prop 2. I don't know what any of this means. I can make some guesses, but I'm parsing something and sending something back. That's all I can really tell. And just take, for example, this is a similar function that does the exact same thing. You can kind of get an idea here of where I'm going with this, is that this is readable. Someone can look at it and see what's going on. I've named things in ways that they make sense. Sometimes you don't have control over what you name things because it was named 10 years ago in a database. You can comment or name some temporary variables. Just a lot of tips to make sure that your code is readable, because you can't get it if you aren't reading. So one thing here is that, so the next thing I want to talk about is negative feedback.
Derek, if I can interrupt for just a moment, there's a question.
Yes.
Kimberly wants to know, what about interpersonal skills? What about how you deliver the constructive criticism / evaluation? How do you help senior developers incorporate them in code reviews?
Yes. Interpersonal skills are extremely important, and and it's also something that you can't really teach. Well, I don't know, maybe you can, but not as a developer. You can't really teach someone to have good interpersonal and communication skills. That's one thing I know from the actually, like, Madison College here. I know that some of their web developers make them like present something in front of the class, and the students hate it. But it's out to the point where you're gonna have to like know how to talk about this. But yeah, I think that is a really good point as far as interpersonal skills. It's so important to be able to relate well with someone. And I'm actually going to talk about that a little bit more in some of my other slides. And because if you come from the standpoint of, I want to teach somebody, I want to learn from somebody. If you have that mindset when you go into your code review, that's just going to help you immensely. And just kind of keeping that at your mind, at the forepoint. And I think that if you can really, if you're like a leader in your organization and you have and you're setting up like the procedure, make it clear that code review is about a learning mindset, a teaching mindset, and kind of check in on things. Look through some comments or something if you have the time, and see, okay, where is that really happening? And if not, kind of get with people and kind of help teach them how to teach. I think is some important things. It's not easy, I'll admit that, but. So, and I guess, this slide kind of fits into the interpersonal skills too. The negative feedback, you really don't want to have your code review be like a final exam. So, you don't want it to be like this stressful thing that they need to get to. You want to, like, limit your feedback. Yeah, not limit your feedback, limit your negative feedback, because and I know the next speaker is going to be talking about performance feedback a lot. So I'm just going to real quickly just talk about, there is, I think it was the Harvard Business Review had an article about negative feedback. Does it help in productivity at your job? And the short answer is no. It makes people scared. It makes them not feel good about working there. It makes them want to hide things. And you want to be in a situation where you're sharing everything. You're putting it all out there, and that you're not going to get shot down. So that's important, because we put our lives. We're spending 6, 8, 10 hours a day coding. Hopefully less than 10, less than that. But we spend a lot of time with this, and to have it like just then put it out there. It can be personal. So just thinking about that. So instead of thinking about the negative feedback, let's just turn it around and make it a positive learning experience. Think about how can you help the person learn and make their code do what it should. Don't think about it as like, oh no, this person did X, Y, and Z again. Getting out of that mindset and getting into the, I want to teach. What can I show this person about this? Got a couple of quotes here from an Amazon engineer who claims to have done like 750 plus code reviews at his time at Amazon. And he was just saying, oh, it's an excellent excellent coaching opportunity. And I like this quote, it's a force multiplier for the team's long-term feature velocity. And that's an important thing here. That's a lot of kind of technical stuff, but basically what we're saying is if you are taking a coaching teaching mentality, when you provide feedback, you're going to help them grow, you're going to help your team get more stuff done in the long term. It's going to provide more investment up front, but I think these are a lot of things where you can just think about it a little bit here and there. Here's an example. I'm pretty sure about this in PHP. Yeah, an example of some code that could be checked in, and this is one place where I could say, someone made some rookie mistakes. They did some things here. And maybe get a little frustrated with them. Those are not good ways to think about it. Remember way back when I was talking about readable code, saying this code's a mess? That's not the kind of attitude that you want to have when coming to a code review. You want to think about positive ways. And I just want you to think about, okay, how would you review this code? I'm just going to point out the two things here because I know probably a lot of people here don't have PHP experience, but the UA section is going to actually modify that private data array in that collection. The other thing is that PHP 7, which has been out for a year or two at least, has a new operator that will clean up a lot of this boilerplate comparison code. So those are two things that I would want to point out right away. But when I point them out, I want to make sure that I'm commenting with kindness. I like this avoiding you and your idea, and giving some positive comments as well. But I think that if you start saying instead of saying maybe you should use this UA sort function, you could say would this work better in this instance? Kind of offer them as suggestions, not necessarily it has to be done this way. So here I'm actually pointing out some things about this function, and maybe the user, the code author wanted to do that, and I just didn't know it. So leaving it open door like that, I think really can kind of contribute to the back and forth. So let's see here. And here's another example, just talking about what they call the spaceship operator in PHP. I'm just like mentioning it out there. And I could actually, I'm just kind of suggesting, and I'm giving a concrete example to help that person learn. And they say, oh, okay. Well, instead of just saying, use a spaceship operator, and they have to go Google it and not know what you mean. I'm saying exactly, okay, here's the kind of thing that you could use. Another thing that I do a lot is actually say, oh yeah, look at this other class that is already in there. Look at this other code and see, I think it does something similar. Maybe we could use that here. And I really like using that we language. Maybe we can do this, or we, even if you're saying we should, do something. Making it we instead of you should do this, or I think you should do this. That's not, the team mentality where, you're bringing it in together, and you're just showing them that you're all together in this, and you're all here to learn from others. Another great quote is just that, you're not just looking for what's wrong. I mean, you're supposed to find the stuff that's wrong. That's part of it. But it's all about how do you present that? How do you present that to someone so they can learn from you? And I've given you a couple of examples here, and I think that a lot of people. I would love examples. On Twitter, I'll try to keep the conversation going after this talk. I'm going to tweet out a lot of stuff, a lot of the resources. But I think that I'd love to hear others' feedback about, okay, what are ways that they can help teach during code review? What's our types of comments? What are ways of approaching it? I think that's really important. Another really important piece of code review to me is the idea that we aren't always, some people don't have a formal process for code review. However, I realized after the fact that a lot of companies are doing code review even though they don't know it. I worked at one organization that really didn't like having anything formal, no formal processes whatsoever. It was, go take some work, get it done. We don't care. We're not going to estimate. We're just going to, do this stuff. And when it's done, and eventually I'll say, why isn't it done yet? But one thing that I realized looking back at that time, at that organization, I will point out that by the time I left, I actually set up a lot of formal processes for them because I was there for a really, really long time. But for at least a good decade of my time there, we were doing what I call an accidental code review. It was this, hey, can you look at this piece of code and help me with this? Can you, I don't know why this isn't working, or I'm going to take this approach. What do you think about that? And I think that this is good, even if you have a formal process, to start doing these informal things as part of your process when you can, and encouraging people to work together and share. I think that's important because once you have something checked in and you're ready to merge to the branch and your feature story is done, well, that's not a good time to change your approach to everything. Maybe you want to get some feedback early on. And, yeah, it's not a formal process, but just looking over someone's shoulder, probably virtually these days, but, the same idea of, yeah, let's, I just did that just a few days ago. Someone said, can I have 20 minutes of your time? And it turned into like an hour-long, pair coding, like just trying this stuff out. And, he was sharing his screen and saying like, does this make sense what I'm doing? I don't understand this technology. I had learned it like 2 weeks earlier. So I was just trying as hard as I could to help them. But together, like we both learned so much from that because it was a new product that we hadn't worked with much. And just being able to try that stuff out together. It only took an hour. That's not much time to build to our client to get them something that really works well. And I think it probably saved more than an hour's worth of time later in the process. So this is just another example I had recently of some of this, like just going back and forth on Slack, talking about, oh yeah, would it be better if we do this? Pop up a warning like this, yeah, you got it to show all the time. Oh yeah, I did it like this. Just that informal things where you're showing each other, how you did that. That's just so important. And it doesn't have to be like. My point here is just it doesn't have to be a big formal process, but just getting people to chat and work together like this, hugely important. So these are some of the resources. I will put them in the chat conference as well as on Twitter. I'm really happy that I was asked to give this talk, and I hope that you will approach your code reviews in the future, whether they're formal or informal, with a good learning mindset. And we can all just learn from each other and keep the learning going. So I'd like to thank you all for coming and attending virtually.
Thank you so much for that, Derek. I do have a couple. So one question I had that you already answered, but I'd like you to go back to it. So now in the time of COVID, where everything is all virtual, right? So I'm assuming, so when we were all in the office, the same office building, it was pretty easy to just say, hey, I want to run something by you, right? Especially when here's my new PBI, I need to work on this. Can I run this by you? Because I could do it this way or this way. Just the informal interaction that you had about designing something. How any thoughts on actually encouraging the collaborative design and collaborative coding? Any thoughts that you have on encouraging, or what steps have you taken to make sure that still happens
Right.
in this virtual world?
Yes, I've actually been working on remote teams for longer than the last year, so I have a bit more of a head start on everybody else. So it really to me it really comes down to having ways for your team to communicate, like Slack channels where people can post things, or just anything informal where people can quickly get in touch with each other. I know one project I was working on, we use Slack, and it was just like, okay, can I call you? Sure. And then we just hit the call button and be like, you spend this time. It's not set up a meeting, send an invite, all that kind of stuff. And I've definitely, I haven't done this, but I've heard from others where they actually have like some time where they just turn on video and have it like you can drop in. Especially if you're like a team lead, you can have like your virtual office hours where you say, okay, normally I'm like frantic and busy and like it takes me days to get back in touch with you, but at this time and this hour, I'm just open, and I'll just keep the keep the camera running. One other thing is actually my wife is a professor, and she's now teaching online, and trying to figure out all this stuff too. And one thing that she does is actually have some open channels on Microsoft Teams where people can communicate and just start video, and so the students can talk, because it's the same problem. How do you normally students like discuss stuff on the way out of class? How do you foster that same environment? So just setting up those things that have like as few barriers as possible to getting to talk, and that's, I think, just really important.
And when so I do have one more question. So if somebody that's new on the team, so somebody who's not used to how the team, they're just new to that, maybe they're like a freshman programmer or whatever, right?
Right.
How do you have to be very sensitive to, I'm not criticizing, don't take this as a criticism, right? Take this as a learning moment. How do you walk that tightrope?
Yeah, it's really tricky. I remember, probably 5 or 6 years ago when I first, I hired somebody who was super smart, but had almost no coding experience. And, and I made a lot of mistakes with him that I wish I could go back in time and correct. And I don't think I ever made him feel bad, but I didn't really, I think one of the biggest things is just taking the time. You have to understand that it takes time. Like I said, on that one slide earlier, you have to build the time in to do it. So just taking the time to, sit together and talk, and then putting things in that like we team mindset, not a I did this, you did that, but just saying, okay, let's see what we can do to get this going. And I think that really helps just kind of eliminate that tension, because I do think you're totally right. One thing that I forget about, because I've been doing this for, over 2 decades. I forget about, like, oh, what is it like when you're just like learning and, you've only committed, to get 5 times and, in your life. And, like just like the whole process is overwhelming. And it's like, well, yeah, this is just, second nature to us who have been doing it for even just a few years. But then when you come into it, it's like, oh yeah, everything is different. So I think it's just a time, and just like, let them, let them feel that, just use language so that, it's like, okay, it's not you did this wrong, but like, let's look at how we do this here. And understanding that just because you do something some way and you've done it 20 years, that's not the right way. It's just the way that works for you.
Thank you so much. That was definitely very informative and very helpful. So thank you so much for that.